just like to follow up. You spoke briefly about policing and what you would do to address policing, looking to get more police into the police force that come from the community. And I'd like you to expound a little bit about policing in terms of police abuse and brutality, what your plan would be to address that.
Yep.
And specifically as it pertains to holding police accountable when they do abuse or murder someone innocent, but also working with those police officers who are doing the right thing, who may be afraid to stand up because of some form of retaliation. So I just would like to know what your plan is around that.
Absolutely, and you know, it's a critical issue. We the only candidate in the primary, the only candidate now, who has a plan on their website. I would encourage you to read it. It's at benjalis.com for reforming our police departments. We have to have more officers that come from the communities that rely on police services the most. I learned that lesson from my grandfather. Grandfather, like I said, was a probation officer. When he retired, he was the chief juvenile probation for West Baltimore. And I can remember, you know, again, parents' marriage was against the law, so my time in Baltimore was more like a slideshow than a movie. It was every summer. And every summer I would come back to my grandparents' house. And things were getting worse. It was the late 70s, it was the early 80s, we're heading to the early 90s. It was a war zone. I remember saying to my granddad, "Aren't you ever afraid?" Probation officers don't carry guns, and he was in many of the toughest parts of the city all the time. And he said, of course I am. And that's why I tell all these boys, all these young men that I supervise, here's my home address. He'd raised his daughter in McCullough Homes and on Pulaski Street and on North Longwood, and eventually he and my grandma moved out to Ashburn. So here's my home address. If you just have the worst day of your life, which means that they may have killed someone, you don't know what to do, you come sit on my porch. I get home at 6 o'clock every day. When I get home, we'll go inside and we'll figure it out together. He understood that courage today saves lives tomorrow. He also understood there is no them. There is only us. And if we operate on that principle, at church, I'm a Christian, Matthew 7:12. Treat others as you would want to be treated. That we get safer. And so having people who come from the community means that the community is not a stranger to them. And that they understand their investment in showing courage in those moments the way that my grandfather understood that. But we can't move forward as long as people are afraid of criminals, and they're too often afraid of the police officers too. How does that happen? It happens when we let a very small number of officers who are abusive and corrupt operate with impunity. It is in the interest of every officer, it is in the interest of every citizen, for us to insist that an officer who kills somebody without cause, who commits murder, is investigated, is accused, investigated, and tried as any other suspected murderer. You know, if we cut the 10 days to 5 days in life, it should be 0. We have to empower the officers who are investigating the allegation of murder more than we would empower the officer who's accused of murder. And we just went through the gun trace task force trial, where we saw that you have these internal boards that sit in judgment that only have officers on them. And if you have an officer there who's biased in any way, it can tilt the entire process against the interests of the public to have a force that is in which only the honest officers can persist. And so I've said that we will include civilians at every level of accountability. I'll do something that Governor Rockefeller did a long time ago. I will appoint a special prosecutor who reports only to me to oversee every allegation of a wrongful shooting, every allegation of corruption. When I was a young investigative reporter, my beat was law enforcement corruption. The reason that there was a job for me to have at that paper was that the reporter who had the job before me, I was told, had been gang raped by the officers she was investigating. No one was ever prosecuted. The time of the police policing the police and being the only ones to police the police has to come to an end.
Let's give them a hand. With us. And we definitely also appreciate each one of you who have come to the Woodlawn Park Church of Christ for this town hall event. We look forward to being a